Welcome back to My Dad Watches The Bachelor. I'm Meredith, and I'm here with my co-host, my dad. How are you doing, Dad?
I'm doing good, but I'm a little tired after our 3 hours of Bachelor and After the Rose last night.
Yeah, we were up pretty late, 8 to 11 is a lot. 8 to 10 is usually a lot, but I found the last hour to be the most interesting out of the three with our After the Final Rose with Emmanuel Acho. We discussed a lot last night.
It was definitely it was definitely two. It felt like two very different shows. Sort of the standard Bachelor show for 2 hours, and then a very different, and fairly interesting hour with Emmanuel Acho, who I'm really not that familiar with, but I thought he did a pretty good job in directing the conversation.
I agree. It was it felt a little weird watching the first 2 hours because I think we both had the hunch that Rachel was going to win, and then we knew that Emmanuel Acho was going to be hosting the show, and that there have been so many racial insensitivities going on this season with Rachel and with Chris Harrison. And for me, during the first 2 hours, like, it was supposed to be happy times of Rachel and Matt, and I don't know if it was the music or we knew what was coming. Like, it seemed very sad and down and depressing, even though it was supposed to be a happy thing.
I agree, and I kept thinking that this stuff was happening before the racial insensitivities and all the issues had flared up, and Matt just seemed very miserable and sad, it wasn't a very happy show, and that was unfortunate. Too bad.
Yeah, I didn't feel that surprised that Matt didn't want to get engaged at the end of the show, even though he claims like that was always his intention. But I've followed Matt James on Instagram for almost 2 years now. So like, I've known who he is. I've seen what he's about, and I never saw him as mature enough to be engaged. So it doesn't surprise me that he all of a sudden was singing a different tune after his mom was like, feelings change, things could happen. And he's like, yeah, this could be my out.
I agree 100%. And I think I've been saying that throughout our podcasting, that I just never got the sense that he was ready to get married. He has struck me throughout this thing as I don't follow him on Instagram or TikTok or InstaFace or whatever it is that you watch these people on these days. But he always seemed to me to be more of a guy that might enjoy hanging with his buddies as opposed to getting ready to get married. So anyway, it didn't surprise me either.
Yeah. So before we get into it, just like a high level, because a lot happened last night. Matt dumped Michelle. Matt decided he didn't want to get engaged, but then ended up with Rachel just dating, I guess. He said that he didn't want to get engaged to her. So that's what happened on the show. After the final rose, we find out that Rachel and Matt have broken up because of all of Rachel's racial insensitivities that have come out since the end of the show. So that's where we're at right now. So let's get into some highs. I have two.
Okay.
First.
Okay.
Michelle. I think Michelle is great. And we're going to talk more about her and all the Bachelorette stuff at the end. I really like Michelle. And I didn't have a ton of highs just because the first 2 hours did seem like very low and depressing. But she's just so lighthearted and kind. And I thought that she did a great job talking with Matt's family. I thought she was very relatable. And I loved how at the end of that date, she's like, oh, wait, I dropped something, picks up a snowball and tries to pelt Matt in the back of the head with a snowball. Like, they just had some serious conversation. She met the family and she was still having fun and being lighthearted, which is the kind of girl I figured Matt would want to go for.
I agree. I thought that she was delightful, and that they seemed to have a very nice rapport. And uh, I, from watching it like we do on television and not being there, of course, it just sort of seemed that she would be the natural person that he would pick to be with. So that was a little disappointing that it didn't go that way.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was hard to watch that breakup. My other high was Emmanuel Acho hosting the After the Final Rose. I thought he did a really good job. I don't know him that well. Like you said, you didn't know him that well, so I don't know if he's an avid fan and watcher of The Bachelor. So he might have been coming into this blind, not having watched most of the season. And I think he did a good job jumping in. And I think that he was able to drive the conversation in a way that Chris Harrison wouldn't have been able to. He was able to relate to Matt and to relate to Rachel, well, not so much Rachel, but to Michelle about being Black and how this has impacted them. Talking to Matt, like Black man to Black man, how they have shared experiences and different experiences. And he asked a lot of hard-hitting questions. And I thought it was a really interesting hour to watch.
I think so as well. I thought he did a good job. And we certainly need to say that those are shoes that we have never walked in, and really can never understand fully. And I'm glad that he was there to lead the conversation. And he asked difficult questions to Rachel, and uh, she didn't hide from them. I thought that she did a good job of trying to be accountable and and live up to that. And she acknowledged wrongdoings, and is says that she's working to improve herself and learn more about that. And we'll take her at her word. But she didn't make any excuses. I appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree. I think she easily could have come in and been like, I didn't know what I was doing was bad, but she's like, that's not an excuse. I don't want anyone to make excuses for me. I'm going to hold myself accountable. And I think that's really important. And I think that's different than how Chris Harrison handled it whenever he was talking to Rachel Lindsay and he was making excuses. And Rachel's like, no one should make excuses for me. What I did was wrong. I'm educating myself. And I think that's like the best way to be handling something like this. So I was happy with how she handled it. And I was happy that Emmanuel was asking her hard-hitting questions like, what are you doing to improve? And it was, I think it went about as well as it could have.
I agree. So it was certainly a different uh, after the rose type situation than we might have seen in the past. Not that I've seen them all, but the ones that I've seen um, were often fairly light, and this was very serious stuff.
Mm-hmm. I did find it amusing that with both Michelle and Rachel, Emmanuel was asking both of them and saying, this is the last time you might ever see Matt. Like, what do you want to say to him? And I'm like, dude, they have each other's phone numbers. They can follow each other on Instagram. They're going to see each other at bachelor parties and like sponsorship things. Like, they will never be able
And,
to.
and for all,
Yeah.
yeah, and they could all end up together on Chlamydia Island at some point in time. So you never know.
Yeah. Well, not Michelle, but at least not this year. But Rachel and Matt, yes, they could go on Bachelor in Paradise.
Well, I've got a couple of highs as well. My first one is Neil Lane, the jeweler, who is just coming in hot, throwing truth bombs all over the place. I was like, you're really in my dad lane, Neil Lane, but I was loving it. He was, saying that, he obviously could sense that Matt had some issues, and, was talking to him in a fairly fatherly way, saying people get blinded by love and they can get into something they're not ready for. Love is hard. Commitment isn't easy. I was like, Neil Lane, you should be you should be giving out the fatherly advice. He was dumping it all over the place. So I was like pro Neil Lane.
Some issues I have here is that he was just kind of dousing the fire here. Like, he probably got briefed that Matt was in a downward spiral of all of these things, and they're like, Neil Lane, see if you can push him over the edge. One. Two, the scene before Neil Lane, we have Matt crying to Chris, being like, I just need some time. Like, I need some space. I need to think. And then they send Neil Lane in to have him pick engagement rings. How is that time and space to think? That doesn't make any sense.
I loved it. I love Neil. I love somebody knocking on the door and says, "Hello, I'm Neil Lane." I just loved it. I thought it was wonderful.
Well, that was my wrong reasons, was the producers or Neil Lane, whoever you want to say, sending him in like that when Matt is obviously very unwell mentally, emotionally. Like, poor guy. Neil Lane, come on, man.
See, now I have to be careful how I tread here in that, thinking, as I was watching the first 2 hours, and in my head, I'm thinking, Matt James, this is pre issues with Rachel and pre-racial insensitivity. And I was not feeling that sympathetic towards Matt. It was like, this is what you signed up for, Matt. I think we've said that before. And here you are, crying at this point in time. But I will say that the other highlight that I wrote down, in this, we're sort of burying the lead here, is the reason that we do this podcast is so I can make sure that you understand that this is not the appropriate way for you to get engaged and find a spouse. And ultimately, Matt does not get engaged. He says, "Here, take a rose. Will you date me?" to Rachel. He doesn't get engaged. So initially I was going to say, well, that's a low light. But then I realized that is a highlight, because Matt James is listening to me and knows that you're not supposed to get engaged on a silly program like this.
See, I would have to push back and say that I don't think the reason we have this podcast is so that you can teach me that that's not the proper way to get engaged. I would say that this is more for entertainment.
Tomato. Come on.
Okay. Well, yeah, I thought it was good too that Matt didn't get engaged. He obviously wasn't ready. It would have sucked way more if he had gotten engaged to Rachel and all this stuff came out. So I agree that wasn't a low, but I don't necessarily know it was a high.
Well, in Dadland, it was a high.
Okay. Is that all of your highs in Dadland?
That's all my highs.
Okay. My lows, I have a few. I thought it was really sad watching Matt's mom cry to Michelle about how it was such a blessing that Matt chose friends that had strong family units, because that wasn't something that she was able to give to Matt growing up. And I just thought that was so sad. And I'm sure, like, you and my mom are still together, so I can't relate to this as much, but I'm sure, I guess, having divorced parents is very impactful. And I don't think that we really saw that much of the season until the past few weeks, how much it really impacted Matt. And it was sad to see how much, like, it seemed like guilt that Matt's mom was also holding on to.
Okay, I'll accept that. I mean, I struggle with Matt. I struggled some with Matt's really, he's not ready to get. He has a conversation with his mom and his brother after both young ladies have met them, and I don't want to say he twists something. You mentioned it earlier of Matt's mom saying, feelings can change over time, and he sort of grasps onto that and sort of seems to run away from any interest in getting engaged. And ultimately, and to some extent, I sort of felt he kept pushing that back on his mother and what she said, and that bugged me a little bit. In that, as a parent, I certainly want to be there to provide advice to you, like I do every week on this show. But ultimately, I trust you to make your own decisions, and I I would hate for you to blame me or your mother for blame is probably not the right word, but it just made me uncomfortable how he kept sort of coming back to that. Maybe that was his lifeboat. Maybe that was his excuse, but that made me a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was a lot of family stuff to take in these past few weeks. My other lows involve Michelle as well. You know, Michelle's dumping was very sad. Yeah, it seemed to come out of the blue, obviously for Michelle, and I don't think that we as viewers really knew where Matt's head was at between Michelle and Rachel. And the timing just wasn't great either. You know, Michelle had just given Matt this very nice gift of matching basketball jerseys that say Mr. and Mrs. James on them because they're going to be a team together and they'll always be each other's life teammates. And then he pretty much almost immediately turns around and gives her the boot. And then we find out on After the Final Rose that Michelle really wanted to have a quick conversation with him in the days following just to get some closure for herself, not to try and change his mind, but just to, you know, quiet her mind and help her understand what had just happened to her. And he turned down that opportunity and said, no, I don't want to have a conversation with her. And I just thought that was pretty shitty of Matt.
That was definitely pretty cold. When they discussed it on the show, I wondered if it was a decision by the producers or other people, but he seemed to own up to it and accept the fact that he had made that decision. That was pretty rough.
Yeah, he might have been too busy talking with Neil Lane to give Michelle the time. So,
well, I could think of worse things to be doing.
All right.
Can I share some of my lows?
Yes, please do.
They're a little bit lighter than yours. Number one, last week I was quite enamored with, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, with Matt's beard when he showed up to talk to all the women. Last night, it just seemed to have exploded and was out of control. So to me, low light on the beard. He needs to do some hacking on that thing. So that was a problem for me.
That beard is disgusting. It's just awful. Yeah. I used to be into beards, and I'm like pretty indifferent towards them now. But once it gets long, it just kind of gets a little gross. Like, who knows what kind of snacks and crumbs Matt is hiding in there for later. Like, that just seems very unhygienic, very long.
Some people can pull beards off, but not everyone.
Yeah.
And that one's just gone on too far.
Some people definitely
can. Some people can't. So another low for me, when they were doing the rappelling down the building, Matt's trying to come off as this super coach, and he's to Michelle. And he's like much more likely as they're going down this building to break his skull. Michelle seems to have things under control. He's sort of all over the place. And I'm like, Matt, you need to be quiet and sort of take care of your own business here. Michelle seems pretty athletic. I think she knows what she's doing. You're about to kill yourself here. Go easy on the coaching for the rappelling there.
Yeah. So. Matt seems like a very athletic guy, and then, I guess maybe he's just never rappelled before. I've rappelled before. It's not that hard. You just kind of walk backwards down, and Matt doesn't even try to walk backwards to get off the building. He just kind of falls backwards, and it's just, he's so tall and lanky that when he's not controlling his limbs, it makes it look so much worse.
So, something else I'll throw out there, and this sort of goes to when you were talking about when Matt dumped Michelle. When he leaves, he goes to the elevator, but there's a 2 there. He's on the second floor, and I hate people that take the elevator from the second floor, especially 29-year-old athletic people. I know that you were in a high-rise in college. I was on the 7th floor for several years in college in a residence hall. If that elevator ever stopped on 2, we would give some serious crap to whoever was getting on or off that elevator, okay? So you don't do that, Matt James. Come on. You don't get on. You take the stairs when you're on the second floor.
Okay, that's fair, but we don't know necessarily where he was going. Maybe he was going to his room that was on the 10th floor.
He had a totally separate lodge or something out there. So I'm not. Don't provide any excuses for Matt. And you want to say, well, the producers made him do it. Come on, they can go down the stairs too. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
didn't like that.
Well, if we're doing some
Oh,
lighthearted lows, I do have one that I would like to acknowledge. During the not proposal, it was cold. It was Pennsylvania in November, and it had been snowing that week, and you could see Matt and Rachel's breath, and this girl is standing outside in a ball gown. Like, you can literally, as the scenes go on, see her arms start to turn red, and Matt's not offering her his jacket. They're not putting her right in front of the fireplace. They have no blankets for her. That's just cruel and unusual punishment for this poor girl.
you're right about that. We're just having a snowball fight with Michelle, and she's coming out in her you know, her no arm, no sleeves or anything, and yeah, she that did not look comfortable or pleasant for her. So, at least it would have been worse if he dumped her right there. So at least that didn't happen. So she got her rose so that she could continue dating. Good for her.
Hopefully, the
Oh, and
adrenaline was keeping her warm.
hold on, this just in. Matt's beard has now reached the Canadian border. It's got to pass a COVID test before it can get in, though. So you need to work on that beard, Matt.
That was a bad joke. I think
It's a dad.
I think he shaved it since then.
It's a dad joke. Okay, let's go with it.
All right. So, are we good with our lows?
Sure.
All right. My right reason. I think you're going to disagree here because you always disagree with this, but I think it's Matt. I'm giving Matt the right reason. He really took some time to reflect on what he wants with his life, what he wants with his future, and he was brave enough on national television, on The Bachelor, where you're supposed to get engaged, to acknowledge that he didn't think he was ready for a proposal. Maybe this was his game plan all along, maybe not, we don't know. But I think it takes a lot of guts to be able to do that when you get a lot of pressure from the franchise, from Chris Harrison, from the fans to end with a happy engagement.
Well, of course, Matt is my wrong reason in that uh, we've seen this coming for weeks, and that it seemed who's this buddy that came to shoot pool with him at one point?
Tyler Cameron.
Yeah, Tyler Cameron Tyler, whoever that guy was. You can just see that he would prefer to hang with his buddies, which is fine. That's fine. But I just never got the sense that he was really prepared to get married, and I'm not sure how serious. Fine, whatever. But you probably shouldn't go on this show when you're really not ready. And I never got the sense that he was ready. So, with that said, I did say it was a highlight that he did not get engaged. I do admire the fact that he had the courage to stand up and say, "Hey, I'm not ready at this point in time." So perhaps he's worthy of both the right reason and the wrong reason this time.
And I know that you say like he knows what he signed up for, but does he really? He was never on the show, and then he just gets thrown into being the lead and can only really base it off of what his friends have told him. So he doesn't. I think that's a little different than the contestants that sign up to be on the show and then get harassed online and get bad edits. Like, they know what they're signing up for, but I feel like the lead is just a whole different ball game. So I think we have to give Matt some props for how he handled his first time ever being on TV.
That's fine. Once some of his buddies start getting married and they're not as available to hang out with them, he'll get married as well. So that's fine.
The inner workings of the male brain.
So for right reason, I did put Michelle, in that I just thought that she she had such a good rapport with Matt. She was great with Matt's family. Got mom hugs, bringing out the Mr. and Mrs. James jerseys. She she's not Tasha, but I thought she could play in the same league as Tasha. So I think she will be an outstanding Bachelorette someday, and she seems to have the awareness to understand that she's got to keep other people around her interested and enthusiastic, and has great energy. So I was, if I'm going to root for the happy ending, I thought Michelle and Matt should have ended up together.
I think that most of America would agree with you there. So we already talked about my wrong reason with the producers and Neil Lane and ambushing Matt when he needed some space. My MVP of the episode is Emmanuel Acho. I thought that he really pulled together this season as much as you could pull together a season that's just falling apart. And he did a great job hosting after the final rose, asking important questions, and helping to enlighten the Bachelor audience, which I would assume is the majority white people, about what it's like to be Black in America. And I think it was really important for Bachelor Nation to watch that. And I think it was a good step that the franchise took. And I hope that they continue to make these steps in the future.
Okay. Well, I think that's good. And with all that said, it still bothers me that Matt just seems so sad and depressed. Even on, not only in the first 2 hours, but when he was, talking in the After the Rose program, and when Rachel was out there, he just seemed beaten down, and I wish him the best. I hope he's okay. He seems like a good guy, and whether it's this whole process or just his, I think he sincerely doesn't want to hurt Michelle, Rachel, or any of the girls that were on this show. And I think that it bothered him. So anyway, it sort of bums me out that, at the end of the program, he just seemed to be so down in the dumps.
Yeah, we usually get to end on a bit higher of a note. And I think we sort of did. So let's talk Bachelorette. We find out last night that we have 2 Bachelorettes, not at the same time. We're going to have 2 different seasons, one with Katie and one with Michelle. And Katie's going to go first. And based off of research I've done, it sounds like Katie's season is going to start filming next week, I think in New Mexico. And then they're going to film Bachelor in Paradise. And then they're going to film Michelle's season. So we've got a lot of content coming to us this summer. And further research, it seems like Michelle's season, it seemed like they wanted Michelle as a Bachelorette. And Michelle said that she wasn't willing to leave her classroom again to go film Bachelorette, since that would be now through May. Since you already abandoned those kids in the fall, you can't really abandon them twice in 1 year. So they're giving Katie the first Bachelorette season, and then Michelle's going to film in the summer. And I'm very excited. I liked Katie. I thought that she was one of the few people early on in the show that had her head screwed on straight. She seems like she likes to have a fun time. And I'm definitely more looking forward to Michelle's season, but I still think it'll be good. I'm hoping Katie can take us back to the basics and we can have a lighthearted, fun season and really just get back to what The Bachelor is about, which is mindless entertainment.
Well, and Katie it was the one that stood up for people that were being bullied. So I think that she will not have much patience for any man drama going on, behind the scenes. So I'll look forward to watching her stamp that out early and often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it'll be good. She's not going to put up with the man drama. And we also found out that Tayshia Adams, our most previous Bachelorette, and Caitlin Bristow, who was a Bachelorette a couple of years ago and who just won Dancing with the Stars, are going to co-host Katie's season and be there to support her. And I think that that's going to be so much fun. Both of those Bachelorettes have a lot of energy and are goofy and fun. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how it works having not only co-hosts, but having Tayshia and Caitlin as the co-hosts. And I hope that their significant others, Zach, because you watched the season. We like Zach. He's a fun guy. And Caitlin is dating someone else from the franchise, Jason Tardik, who's quite the businessman beau. He's very cute. And I hope that they're in quarantine as well in New Mexico so that we can maybe get some like triple dates going. Just as an idea for all of those Bachelor producers listening right now, we want a triple date.
Well, and so question is the job of co-hosting the show, is that an upgrade over influencer, or is that same level as influencer? Where does this rank?
I would say it's an upgrade for sure. I mean, you're going from Instagram as your platform to ABC as your platform. That's national television. It's pretty impressive. I'm not sure how co-hosting will work, if they'll each take a few weeks, or if maybe they each get to come in and be like, Katie, this is the second to last rose. Katie, this is the last rose of the night. So they each get to count every rose ceremony. I don't know how it's going to work. It'll be interesting.
Now, I also noticed when they made this announcement, they did not make this sound like they would be necessarily the permanent replacements for Chris Harrison, and I don't think they've ruled out Chris Harrison coming back at some point in time. So I guess that's all still to be determined.
Yeah, I think that this announcement was just specifically for Katie's season of The Bachelorette. We don't know about Paradise. We don't know about Michelle's season. I have seen quite a few interviews that Rachel Lindsay's been doing, where she's been talking to contestants from both Matt's season and Tayshia and Claire's season, specifically contestants of color, who have said that they're not comfortable going to Paradise if Chris is hosting. So it'll be, and it's more popular people. It's Ivan, it's Piper, people like that say they won't go if Chris Harrison will be there. So it'll be interesting to see how the franchise responds to that.
Okay, well, I guess you'll be watching.
Yes, I will definitely be watching Paradise. We're TBD on if we can get the dad to watch Paradise.
Well, my biggest concern is just making sure that Abigail is okay, because I thought that she was the nicest person that we've seen come through this franchise, and I hope that she does not end up on Paradise. That's my hope for poor Abigail.
I think there is a 95% chance that she will.
That makes me sad.
All right. Well, do you want to wrap up Matt's season of The Bachelor with some fatherly advice?
Yeah. So I mean, there was good advice being thrown out by Matt's mom, by Neil Lane. Matt's mom was talking about how telling someone that you're in love with them is really big and not to go there too quickly. I think that's good advice. I don't think, sometimes I fear that people throw I love you around too quickly. We probably talked about that as the show progresses, and questioned contestants that bring in the love too quickly. Episode 2, no. Maybe toward the end, okay. As I said earlier, you and people of your age, you make your own decisions. We're there to provide some guidance. We hope that our parental actions don't scar you too much, and that we don't have to pay any psychology bills for you. We want you to make your own decisions, but we're there for you. And I'll end with this one. If you wait for perfection, you're going to be waiting a long time. This is really for Matt. We all have flaws, and the honeymoon doesn't last forever. So you really have to make sure that you've got a strong foundation. And I think this is what Matt's mom was trying to get across to Matt, that that relationships are based on love, respect, communication. There's got to be more substance over style, and that's what makes for a lasting relationship. So good luck to Matt, and good luck to all the contestants. I hope they find that at some point in time, as I hope you do as well.
Wow, that was really deep. My Meredith advice is to Matt, kiss with your eyes closed.
I think he's figured that one out by the end.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between acknowledging you have a problem and fixing it.
This is true. Well, he knows it. I was sort of looking last night to see if he was still doing it at the end. I couldn't tell.
Well, he probably didn't realize that it was a problem by then because he wasn't getting called out on it yet. I wasn't looking too closely at the makeout sessions last night, but I would imagine there was still some open eye kissing there. But I think that's all we have for Matt's season. So you can join us next season to hear all about Katie being our new Bachelorette from the right perspective and my dad's.